All right, let's talk Tinder.
Yeah.
Specifically, let's deep dive into this thing called ghosting.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
that frustrating yet strangely fascinating phenomenon that seems to go hand in hand with online dating these days.
It's definitely amplified in the digital age, that's for sure.
Right.
Though it is interesting to think about how ghosting existed long
Oh,
before
totally.
swiping right was even a thing.
So true.
Yeah.
Like, think about unanswered letters or calls never returned. Oof, ouch.
Yeah.
But you sent over some fascinating research
I did.
from the University of Ljubljana,
Mm-hmm.
where they interviewed Tinder users in Slovenia about their ghosting experiences.
Yeah. And what I found so valuable about this particular study
Okay.
is that it goes beyond simply labeling ghosting as bad behavior.
Right.
It really digs into the complex motivations and anxieties at play,
Yeah.
especially in the world of online dating.
Okay, so before we get into those motivations, can we just take a second to appreciate the sheer scale of Tinder? We're talking over 1.6 billion swipes per day.
It's wild.
That's a mind-boggling number of potential connections.
It is.
Or potential ghostings, I guess.
Yeah. And yeah, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The study found that for many users,
Yeah.
ghosting isn't just about being flaky or avoiding awkwardness.
Right.
It's actually used as a safety strategy, particularly by women.
That makes sense. When you're meeting strangers online, there are inherent risks.
Sure.
Especially for women who, let's face it, are statistically more likely to experience harassment or unwanted advances.
Exactly. And the interviews in the study really bring this to light.
Okay.
One woman, Vita, shared her experience of being on a video call with a match who started making fun of her appearance.
Oh, wow.
It's a pretty clear example of why someone would choose to ghost.
It's like, why even engage with that negativity?
Right.
Ghosting almost becomes a form of self-preservation.
Exactly. It's a way of setting a boundary and protecting yourself in a situation where you might feel vulnerable.
Totally. And it's not always about overt negativity either.
Oh.
Another woman, Hannah, talked about receiving unsolicited explicit pictures.
Oh, God.
I mean, come on, talk about a reason to ghost.
Absolutely. These experiences underscore a very real fear for many women using these platforms.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then there's Emma's story.
Right.
She ghosted a guy who kept pushing for a Netflix and chill situation at his apartment, which she was not comfortable with.
Oh, no.
You can't blame her.
I know.
It makes you realize that ghosting, while often seen as rude,
Yeah.
can sometimes be a necessary tool for navigating a potentially risky situation.
Right. And I think what's important to remember
Okay.
is that ghosting often stems from an imbalance of power dynamics.
Yeah.
Particularly in the online dating world.
Mm-hmm.
Women, unfortunately, often bear the brunt of unwanted attention and pressure.
So ghosting becomes a way of taking control,
Right.
of reclaiming agency in a space where they might feel vulnerable.
Precisely. And, when we look at this from a broader societal perspective, it speaks to the larger conversation about online safety and the unique challenges women face in digital spaces.
This is already making me rethink my whole perspective on ghosting.
It's interesting stuff.
But it sounds like it's not just about safety concerns.
No, not at all.
This study also touches on how digitally exhausting
Yeah.
this whole online dating scene can be.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is where we get into the concept of digital overload and Tinder fatigue,
Okay.
which I think a lot of people, regardless of gender, can relate to.
No, totally. I mean, constantly swiping, matching, messaging, it's a lot to manage.
It is. One of the men interviewed, Maciej, talked about feeling completely overwhelmed
Yeah.
by trying to juggle multiple conversations.
Right.
He said it started to feel like a chore, like he was constantly on,
Yeah.
and it really started to drain him.
I can see how that would be exhausting. It's
Yeah.
like with real-life conversations, there's a natural ebb and flow, right?
Totally.
But online, it's this constant stream of notifications and expectations to respond quickly.
Exactly. And that constant pressure to be available and engaging
Yeah.
can be incredibly taxing, leading to a sense of burnout.
Which brings us to Anastasia,
Right.
who talked about getting bored with the superficiality of many of her interactions.
Mm-hmm.
It was all just small talk and judgments based on looks, and she felt like she was losing interest in the whole process.
This actually speaks to a larger phenomenon known as digital disaffect.
Digital what now?
Digital disaffect.
Okay.
It's that feeling of boredom and detachment that can arise even when we're constantly engaging with digital platforms.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're going through the motions, but there's no real depth or connection.
Ah, okay. I think I get it.
Yeah.
So it's not just Tinder fatigue, it's like digital life fatigue.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that this feeling of disaffect often leads to a cycle of deleting and reinstalling the app.
Wait, so you're telling me I'm not the only one who's deleted Tinder in a fit of frustration only to re-download it a few weeks later?
You're definitely not alone.
Oh, good.
The researchers found that this cycle of engagement and disengagement is a common experience for many users.
So it's like a love-hate relationship with the app,
It seems that way.
but also maybe with the whole concept of online dating.
It's this push and pull between the desire for connection
Yeah.
and the exhaustion that can come with the digital dating game.
All right, so we've got safety concerns, digital fatigue.
Yeah.
But what about the ethics of ghosting?
That's where things get really tricky.
Okay.
And honestly, the study doesn't shy away from the ethical complexities of ghosting.
Yeah,
There are definitely some conflicting viewpoints.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah.
So what are people saying?
Well, a lot of the female participants saw ghosting as an acceptable,
Yeah.
even necessary way
Right.
to manage the sheer volume of interactions they were getting.
I can definitely see that. If you're getting bombarded with messages,
Right.
it's got to be overwhelming to try to respond to each one individually, especially if you're not feeling it.
Right. And one woman, Meta, was very outspoken about this.
Okay.
She said something along the lines of, "I don't owe anyone a response just because we matched."
Wow.
She even went so far as to say that ghosting should be more normalized.
That's a strong stance. But, I can understand where she's coming from. If someone's making you uncomfortable or just not vibing with your energy, why should you feel obligated to engage?
That's a valid point.
Hmm.
It speaks to a sense of agency and control, especially when you consider the context of women often feeling pressured to respond to unwanted advances or attention.
So ghosting in that sense becomes a way of establishing boundaries and prioritizing your own safety and comfort.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, of course, there's the other side of the coin.
Right.
Many of the male interviewees found ghosting to be incredibly hurtful and confusing.
Yeah.
They wished people would be more upfront, even if it was just a clear rejection.
Yeah, I've definitely been on the receiving end of that. And it's not a fun feeling.
No,
The uncertainty can really mess with your head.
absolutely.
Mm.
And it's interesting because one guy, my judge, said he'd much rather be outright rejected than left wondering what he did wrong.
Right.
He talked about how being ghosted triggered a lot of anxiety and overthinking.
When you put it that way, it makes you realize that ghosting, even when it's not intended maliciously, can have a real emotional impact.
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
The study actually uses the term microaggression
Okay.
to describe the feeling of being rejected and dismissed without explanation. It can really chip away at your self-esteem.
Microaggression is a pretty loaded term. It makes you wonder if we're maybe overlooking the emotional toll ghosting takes on people, even in a casual dating context like Tinder.
I think that's a valid point.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the need for more empathy and awareness in how we communicate with each other,
Right.
even in the digital world.
Okay, so it seems like there's no easy answer here. We've got valid reasons on both sides, plus the added layers of digital fatigue and safety concerns. It almost feels like ghosting is less about individual rudeness and more about a systemic issue with how we approach online dating.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's about navigating this weird in-between space where the rules of traditional dating etiquette haven't quite caught up with the fast-paced, often impersonal nature of apps like Tinder.
It's like we're all fumbling through this new frontier of digital intimacy, trying to figure out what's acceptable and what's not.
And it's messy, for sure.
Right.
But what's interesting is that even amidst all this ghosting, the study found that people are finding ways to adapt and create more meaningful connections, or at least trying to.
Oh, yeah. What about that guy Luca who suggested connecting on social media as a backup plan?
Exactly. He realized that people were constantly deleting their Tinder accounts.
Yeah.
So he started suggesting adding each other on Instagram or Facebook just in case.
That's actually pretty smart. It's like creating a safety net for your connections so you don't lose touch entirely if someone disappears from the app.
Right, and I think it speaks to a desire for more stability and continuity in a digital landscape that can feel very ephemeral.
Speaking of ephemerality, the study also found that deleting and reinstalling the app is a pretty common coping mechanism for dealing with Tinder fatigue.
It's like a digital detox.
Yeah.
One woman, Anastasia, talked about needing to take breaks from the app to avoid burnout. She would deactivate her profile, but knew she'd likely come back when she was feeling more up to it.
Makes sense.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like hitting the reset button. But then there's Masha, who mentions something that I found both hilarious and terrifying. She resets her Tinder every 3 months, which means all the people she's ghosted just reappear. Can you imagine?
Oh, the awkward potential re-encounters.
Right.
It's like a ghosting graveyard coming back to life.
Exactly. It really highlights the cyclical nature of online dating. We crave connection, we get burnt out, we take a break, and then we jump back in only to potentially repeat the whole cycle again.
And it's almost like the app itself is designed to perpetuate this cycle.
Yeah.
There's this constant stream of new faces, new possibilities, which can be exciting, but also incredibly overwhelming.
It's like we're always chasing that initial spark, but maybe the way these apps are structured makes it harder to build something lasting.
That's an interesting thought.
Huh.
It makes you wonder if maybe the problem isn't just ghosting, but the very design of these platforms and how they influence our behavior and expectations.
So where do we go from here? Is this just the new normal of dating, this cycle of connecting and disconnecting, hoping to find something real amidst the digital noise?
Well, I think the study makes it clear that there are no easy answers.
Right.
Ghosting is a complex issue with deep-rooted social and technological underpinnings, but I think the first step is simply awareness.
Awareness
The
of.
forces at play, both societal and technological, that shape our behaviors and expectations in the online dating world.
Once you start to recognize those forces, you can make more conscious choices about how you engage in this space.
Right.
So like thinking critically about your own motivations for using dating apps
Yeah.
and being more intentional about how you interact with others.
Yes, and being mindful of the impact your actions have on others, even in a seemingly casual setting like Tinder.
That makes sense. It's easy to get caught up in the game of it all, but at the end of the day,
Right.
we're all just people looking for connection.
Right, and even if you're not looking for a serious relationship,
Right.
there are still ways to be respectful and considerate of other people's feelings.
So like even if you're not interested in pursuing something, maybe sending a quick message saying, hey, it was nice chatting,
Yeah.
but I'm not feeling a romantic connection instead of just disappearing.
Exactly. A little bit of communication can go a long way. And who knows, maybe that simple act of honesty could even help shift the culture of online dating towards something a little kinder and more authentic.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
But it does make you wonder if technology is fundamentally changing our expectations of relationships, or if it's just amplifying tendencies that have always existed.
It's a fascinating question to consider. Are we becoming more avoidant because of technology, or are we just better at avoiding now?
Like ghosting might be a new term, but haven't people always found ways to disappear when things got uncomfortable or they lost interest?
For sure, unanswered letters, unreturned phone calls. Those are all forms of ghosting, just without the digital label.
I guess what's different now is the sheer ease and efficiency with which we can disconnect. It's just a swipe or a block away.
That's true, and maybe that ease of disconnection makes us less willing to put in the effort to communicate, to work through challenges, to build those deeper connections that require vulnerability and patience.
It's like we're trading depth for convenience.
Perhaps. But I think it's important to remember that we still have the power to choose how we want to engage with technology.
So what can we do? How can we be more mindful, more empathetic in our digital interactions?
Well, for starters, I think it's about bringing our values of respect and authenticity into the online space. Remembering that even though it's mediated through screens, there are real human beings on the other side of those swipes and messages.
That's a great reminder. So as you continue navigating the wild world of online dating, ask yourself, how can you contribute to a more positive and communicative environment?
How can you bring a little bit more humanity to the digital dating landscape?
That's something we can all strive for. Well, this has been a truly insightful deep dive into the world of ghosting on Tinder. Thank you for all the fascinating insights.
It's been my pleasure.
Okay.
Happy swiping, everyone. And remember, a little kindness goes a long way.